Hi, I'm Mark Stelter, Director of Community Association Lending here at Itasca Bank Trust Co. Even after 20 years, I wake up every day with the same goal, to make maintaining properties as stress-free as possible for property managers and board members of any size association. So whether you're a manager, board member, unit owner, vendor, or just someone curious about life inside a community association, join me as I sit down with guests from the field. Welcome to Community Association Insights. Let's get into it. Welcome back to another edition of Community Association Insights. My name is Mark Stelter. I'm the Director of Community Association Lending for Itasca Bank and Trust Company. Today, we're going to be talking contractors, and I have with me an expert in the industry, Stathie Panayi from Adams Roofing. Thanks for being here. We certainly appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mark.
The goal of these podcasts has been and continues to be an educational process for the board members and the property managers and really business partners, but primarily the board members that are facing issues, whether it be legal or finance or insurance, banking, and in this case, contractors, and just trying to provide the board member and the property manager a little bit more detail and insight into the project that they're taking on. And so we've gone through a series of different topics. We've gone through the benefits of being a member of CAI. We've had lawyers on. We've had accountants, insurance. We've discussed the benefits of professional management versus self-management. And so when we look at the topics that we encounter, it's really contractors is a big one. But let's start first with a little introduction. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Mark. My name, again, is Stathie Panayi. I'm with Adams Roofing. I really appreciate the opportunity coming on today. We've been members with CAI for probably over 15 years, I believe, so it's been quite a while. I'm third generation with the company, and I was fortunate enough that we've been around dealing with property management since 1978.
Wow, that's a good long time.
Yeah, it's gone by quick, I guess.
You've probably seen a lot of changes in the industry too.
Yes, I've personally been in the industry myself for 22 years, and even in that 22 years, products have changed, installation requirements have changed. So it's never the same.
Yeah. Zoning requirements,
yes,
probably, or all that goes into it. Well, good. Well, thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to start it the way I do a lot of the podcast, which is I'm a new board member. I moved into the association. Somehow I got on the board, and now I'm in charge, which is the common scenario that we tend to get with a lot of board members that we work with. Or I've been on the board for a while, but I've never undertaken a major common element repair project before. I've never dealt with a contractor before. So if I'm a board member, and this is going to be perhaps my first time dealing with a contractor, what would you say maybe as kind of a handy, tip, so to speak? What should I be prepared for, or what should I be preparing to do as I'm working with the contractor?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel it's very important that the board can at least somehow put together specifications for that specific project. With that said, it would be able to keep whoever's bidding on it on the same playing field, and they're going to be able to really compare apples to apples.
And who's going to put those specs together? Who's going to prepare the specifications?
Well, they could go online, which we've seen, and try to follow the guidelines of the manufacturer. But in all reality, if they really want a good peace of mind, and doing this for quite a while, I would really suggest starting with like a engineering firm. That way they would be able to walk through any unforeseens, any specifications that may need to be updated or because of new codes.
Yeah.
So that would be, if they could, that would be the great way to start.
And if they're talking with you or another contractor, there's engineering firms that you work with that you trust that you might make referrals to, or is that something that they're on their own and find?
They can definitely look up online and get a few. There are a few in the industry that are really good, and they're because they're used to working with a lot of the condo townhome boards. Some of the simpler things that they could do is just make sure that the roofing contractor at least has a state license, of course. That way, they're on track to doing the right thing and their paperwork is correct through the state. Also, typically, siding and roofing contractors will have the opportunity to be certified through a specific manufacturer. And that gives you a little bit of peace of mind since you know that they're going to put on the product correctly.
So if they're picking a particular manufacturer and you're certified with that manufacturer, that's telling them we've used this before, we've installed this before, we've met the manufacturer's qualifications for being recommended to work with their products.
Yes, and the neat thing about that is there's thousands of contractors around. I mean, they're just. I get that, right? No one wakes up and
it's a low barrier to
like,
enter business, no doubt. Yeah.
Wake up and say, yes, I'm buying a roof today. I get it. But the thing is, there's only 3% of those thousands of contractors that are actually certified to do that product. And that's pretty scary if you think about it. Yeah. Most of the major products online will have a spot where you could even pinpoint a contractor within your area code, and there'll be some specific contractors that have been certified. So I think that really helps take a burden off of the bidding process.
Sure. And one of the things that we recommend with no matter who you're working with for your association, regardless if it's an attorney, an accountant, a bank, a contractor, is look to CAI. CAI is a nationwide organization. They have chapters in every state. The chapter for Illinois, it's cai-illinois.org. You can call, talk to Cheryl Murphy. She'll walk you through the process. Membership is not expensive, so I always recommend CAI, and I always recommend vendors and business partners that are in CAI because I think those particular companies seem to show a real dedication to the residential community association industry. How much work do you do just with residential community associations as opposed to commercial work? Is there a breakout between?
It's probably like over 80% steep slope townhome condominium associations. And with that said, a whole nother revenue of that or a place of business is also the service work. So that could be its own thing itself.
Yeah. Okay, good. So you're clearly versed in working with associations.
Yeah, I feel that you definitely need to make sure that a company has access to a service team. That way you know that it is a legitimate company if they can get someone out within a day or two to, something as simple as one missing shingle or a downspout that's loose. If they have trouble doing that, that would tend to lead to maybe they subcontract all their work out, which is not an issue, but I feel that in-house employees still very important in a service department.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That seems to make a lot of sense. The term, I always hear on the advertisements is licensed, bonded, and insured. Mm-hmm. So if we walk through those three, licensed, bonded, and insured, just kind of walk us through all three of those terms.
Yes. Yeah. So licensing, obviously you get licensing through
is it just the state level?
The state level, yes. Okay. Bonding will typically happen through each county. It's a little bit different how it ranges. And I'm so sorry, the last one was insured. So insurance is something I'd really like to talk about if that's okay.
Sure.
When contractors have to purchase insurance, a lot of that is based off the amount of payroll that they pay.
Okay.
And some contractors will try to get the minimal amount of insurance, or they'll have a minimal amount of workman comp insurance. So if a board member is looking into getting some work done, I think you'd be very specific on the amount of insurance they have.
So when we're talking about licensed, bonded, and insured, the insurance part, what are they insuring?
So the insurance part will break down to two parts in that policy. It'll be their liability. So obviously if anything were to happen throughout the property, for instance, if someone were to hit a car or something small were to happen on that. The other part of that policy is going to be the workman comp, and that's going to be very important to make sure that they have a significant amount of insurance.
And the workman's comp's that's gonna cover an employee of the contractor that might get hurt on the job.
That's correct. Now, a horror story, again, just for being in this business personally for 22 years, there was a time once where someone that was on site didn't have the correct insurance, and unfortunately, the association had to suffer they're the ones that got sued, and that would have never really happened.
And we had Cindy Fitz on, who talked about the insurance side, and she was actually recommending that when you hire a contractor and you're taking on a project, that the association have workman's comp insurance, because in her eyes, from the insurance side of things, even though the contractor is working on site, you're employing that contractor, and then by extension, their employees. And if something happens, and you just alluded to it, they're not just going to sue the contractor; they're going to sue the homeowner, the board,
Right.
homeowners association.
Yes, they definitely will work their way up the chain, if you will.
Right. So that makes sense. And then the bonded side of it. What is the
Bonding is typically throughout each county is a little bit different. That's just saying that they are certified through that specific county, and
Okay.
that the actual village or county holds that bond.
I've
So-
seen some villages that when they require that bond, it almost is that where it's like a completion agreement or a bond?
That is correct.
If the contractor somehow walks off or leaves and it's not done, that bond covers the.
That is correct.
Is that
It's
how that
almost
works?
like an insurance policy in itself.
Okay.
And there are different values of that bond depending on the size of the
Because I'm sure
project.
the village doesn't want a half-completed roof, and then all of a
Right.
sudden the contractor's gone, and the board is saying, "Look, we don't, we paid them. We don't have any
Correct.
any more."
Yes, and it's I've heard stories of that happening. Unfortunately, it's something that people have to deal with. So making sure that they've got all of their ducks in a row and taking their time during the process of hiring is crucial.
So I've hired my engineer. I've got my specs. I've got my specifications. I know the scope of my project. I'm going to be replacing my siding, or taking off my roof, or some combination of the two. I've started to interview contractors, and I give those contractors the specifications from the engineer.
The beauty of it, if you end up hiring an engineer, for instance, like Waldman Engineering, they're terrific to deal with because they will actually put the specifications together, and they'll round up a group of contractors they feel competent to bid on that project.
Okay. So they're
that
actually
way-
going out and doing kind of the.
That's correct. They'll
work
have
for
what
the
is
board.
called a pre-bid meeting. So if you are asked to bid on the project as a contractor point of view, we'll receive an email with that information.
Okay.
And then we all basically show up that morning or afternoon, really pinpoint all the specifications. And at that point, that's when a lot of the unforeseen start to come up,
Okay.
So once that is done, that just really takes a burden off of the board, because the engineer is kind of taking over from there, and he'll collect the actual proposals and put them together in a spreadsheet, which I think is marvelous, because you'll definitely know that everything is comparing apples to apples.
And they understand the terminology.
Yes.
They'll be able to see a bid, and Mark Waldman will be thrilled that you used his
Yes.
company name. But they'll be able to kind of put the terminology together, say, hey, we got your bid, but you're missing something here that
Yes.
was in the specifications. Rebid this with the
Right.
all of the information. And then that engineer brings it to the board and says, here's 3, 4, or 5 different bids.
Mm-hmm.
I've looked at them all. They all cover what it is that you want to accomplish. Now you can make an informed decision.
Yes, and leading back, excuse me, to like a Waldman Engineering, he has certain inspectors that will get involved with the project, and they are really by the book. So you can really have that sense of comfort when you know that they're going to pinpoint and nitpick any little thing to make sure that that is exactly what the customer
Right.
was paying for. And as a contractor point of view, I absolutely love that, because we know that we completed it as like we said we did, and then we're able to get paid.
Okay.
It's all fun and games till the invoice comes out.
Right. And when we're working with boards and they're approaching us for the financing side of the project, we we don't get that far involved in terms of specifications and they're free to choose whatever contractor they want because it's not something that we warrant or require or even understand. I mean, we're a lender, we're not a contractor. So I guess having that engineer, being able to kind of interpret the terminology within the industry is certainly helpful. We kind of talked beforehand when you and I were discussing this. The inspections, if a board is, naturally suspicious or just suspect, is the engineer that put the specs together the one to do the inspection on the work because they recommended these contractors, or do you get an independent third-party inspector?
No, they'll have their own in-house inspectors,
Okay.
and they definitely know the certain specifications. Again, because they were taking the time to put that project together and specify what they want to be used, they're very familiar with how it's going to be installed. The other nice thing, another point on the engineers is he's had the opportunity to work with all of the contractors that he asks. So he knows, or they know that, and he doesn't get involved. They won't get involved with who to pick, obviously, but they'll make sure that they're helping you compare apples to apples.
So then if we look at the mistakes that a board might be making early on in the process, I'm assuming, high up on the list is going to be you didn't hire an engineer. I have financed projects a second time on so many occasions where the phone call is, we had our roof replaced 5 years ago and we have water coming in. And then when you start getting into the story, there wasn't an engineer that was involved. There wasn't an inspection that was taking place. And like you said, the 3% rule, of contractors, it's very easy to become a contractor, and it's probably even easier to bid low if the work isn't of the highest standard.
Right.
And so I see that if they're missing that engineering component or they're missing the inspections, and especially we can talk a little bit about professional management versus self-managed, because there's a lot of self-managed associations.
Yes.
And we work with a lot of self-managed associations. We're one of the few banks that actually will do that. And we always encourage professional management, but we understand, professional management might not be for every board. There's just certain boards out there that are determined to manage the property independent. That's fine. But with that comes probably more risks, especially when you're entering into negotiations with a contractor. Maybe talk a little bit about the benefits you've had working with professional managers versus some of the self-managed associations.
Sure. I do find it challenging at times working with self-managed because, again, they typically won't use an engineer, much like you just said. So it gets frustrating at times because I try to do the best I can with knowing how the roof should be replaced, for instance. So I'm not really concerned on how low or how my pencil can be sharpened to get it to them, because that means I'm just kind of not doing the right thing or having the right product. So I feel that they typically will try to go with the lowest bidder.
It's almost that phrase, stepping over $1 to pick up a dime.
Yes.
I'm going to skip the engineer, and, in the formal specs, I'm just going to go to a contractor and say, look, I need siding or I need a roof. Give me a bid. And, you're left to come out to the project site. And I'm assuming it's a lot more challenging to bid a project without a set of specifications.
Yes, it does make it challenging at times because there's such a wide range of different building products and materials. And unfortunately, some contractors will use the cheapest material just to get the job. And it's just something that I was not seeing fit for what I wanted to do for the customer.
Yeah.
The other thing is these people, when they're self-managed, they have their own life going on. They're busy at work. They may have children's baseball games or et cetera. So the communication is sometimes hard if there ever were like an unforeseen, God forbid, where an association that has a relationship with a property management, at least the property manager can take some of that, some of those issues off their back.
And they've seen they've worked with, just like you were saying with the engineer, a professional manager has, a seasoned professional manager has likely worked with vendors in all areas of community association living, including the contractors.
Sure.
And kind of like what you were saying with Waldman is, sure, they've worked with different firms and they know who understands it and they know who uses high quality products and all that goes into it, and they can make that recommendation. A manager's going to do the same thing. They're going to know, I've worked with Adams,
Right.
and just from a bank's perspective, I see the checks that we process for payments, and we write a lot of checks to Adams. There's just and what that tells us is, okay, this is a firm that gets used on a repetitive basis. And what we can then tell board members that call us is, look, I'm not an engineer. I don't inspect the work. What I can tell you is these are names that I see a lot. And, these are people you might want to at least contact and have the discussion so that you can kind of get started.
Yeah, and I really truly feel that even if they're specifically if they're self-managed, to really get involved with the tools that CAI provides, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I agree.
And as a contractor, again, it's helped grow my business tremendously and build relationships, believe it or not, with other contractors for things I may not do or feel comfortable doing or bidding on.
Right.
So that's been really neat. But really to take advantage of the tools that you guys offer is pretty special.
Okay, so I've got specs. I've got my bids that are coming in. I'm looking at my bids. I make the decision. I pick a contractor, and now you're coming on site. What am I, as a board member, going to expect to, or I should say, what am I going to experience when you invade?
Yeah, I was going to say a big brigade.
It really is an invasion, right? Because you have to be there with the trucks and the materials and the workers and all that goes in this quiet community is all of a sudden upended.
Oh, yeah. My biggest rule I have with my production department is communication. I feel that before a project is even started, someone on that board should meet with the site supervisor and go over, for instance, delivery dates with material. Those are, in fact, big semi-trucks that come out, and they've got to get in and maneuver around some of those cul-de-sacs, for instance.
Right.
The other thing is little things you won't think about, like where does the porta potty go? I mean, the men have to and women have to use the washroom. So that's just something where if you don't communicate that and you just, as a contractor, drop where you think it should be dropped, it's going to make some issues. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's key right off the bat. And then I really feel that the contractor, should be contacting them and letting them know every phase of the way. It's really funny because a lot of board members won't attend meetings unless it's like something to do with like a raise in the rates or a special assessment, of course. So if a contractor usually is awarded the job, he'll kind of go through everything with the board. But again, there's hundreds of homeowners that haven't been to that meeting.
Right. There's only going to be a sample. And that's pretty common.
So I feel like it would be important for at least one of the board members to take on that role of communicating. Because obviously the contractor will communicate with the management company, but sometimes they're out of the loop, the board member.
Right.
And so once you get that down, I feel that is a really good way to start. Now, another big concern that we typically have is, for instance, when you remove a roof system, it's kind of unforeseen. We really don't know what we're running into. And, there's been times where maybe the roof's leaked for a long time from a leak that no one caught. So now you have damaged plywood or dry rotted plywood.
And that stuff you can't tell when you're doing the initial inspection.
I mean, you really can't. I mean, I'm a pretty heavy set guy. It feels a little mushy here and there, but overall, no. And I guess what I'm trying to get as with the communication and with one of those board members, it's very important that they're aware of that right away because no one wants those kind of surprises. And so, again, as a contractor, I feel it's very important to communicate and make sure one of those board members knows what's going on.
And in today's world, I mean, in times past, it was more challenging as far as to communicate, with the unit owners. But in today's world, a lot of the management firms have websites for the property. And, talk to you, if you're professionally managed, talk to the manager, find out, is there a way that we can keep the unit owners up to date on the work that's being completed? And even more importantly, is there a way for the unit owner to communicate back to the manager without having to call the office or call a number. So many people work from home or work remote, wherever it might be. Is there a way for a unit owner to get a question or a complaint in quickly to the manager so they can communicate with you and say, hey, whatever it might be, there's materials in my yard, or there's wrapping that's blowing around the property. We need to get it cleaned up. And if that's the case, the website is crucial in order to communicate that. If you're self-managed, it might be a little bit more challenging because maybe you don't have a website. Maybe you do. But figure out a way to communicate with the unit ownership so that, like you said, communication's key. If they don't have a way to get back to the board or to the managing agent in order to, be heard for an issue that they're having, it really does raise the level of tension.
Yes.
Quite a bit. And then you probably feel that because you got people now coming out of their units talking to the workforce, and it's the closest object to me. So that's the one I'm going to go to.
Yeah. And a word of advice, never really talk to a ground guy. Just make sure you go right to a supervisor because, they'll just shake their head and make sure you're happy. But to touch on that, I think, that's a great, you knocked that right out of the park. We recently had a condo complex where it was a lot of the homeowners, that specific one, was really, we were able to provide them with a schedule on a blog that they put together. And I thought that was a terrific idea. So, because they were really up to date on everything. So that was great. They touched that.
Yeah. If the unit owners, it's almost like a chat room. If they can be, seeing everybody else's comments, and I see this a lot with video meetings. If you're on Teams or one of the other video platforms, people are asking questions live during the meeting, and the board is kind of addressing those questions one at a time as they come up, and there's ways for unit owners to be able to do that now. Even though you're not in a meeting, but they can get their concerns addressed.
Sure.
So
yeah,
I think communication is definitely key. So you're on site. You found a place for the porta potty, which is certainly key. You found a place to put the materials. What's going to happen then at that point? What's a typical schedule for work? Is there times that you can't work and times that you can? Are you restricted by the villages? When you can
every
start?
village will usually range a little bit. Respectfully, we typically like the crews to start around 7:30, 8 a.m. They're gonna usually in the summertime probably work past 6, but at that time we're just making sure that the ground's really clean. We don't really like to disrupt the tenants as much as
Right.
we should be. So you definitely want to make sure that the contractor is letting you know when that project is going to start, because it's very difficult for people not to know that, and then like their cars are stuck in the driveway, for instance, and now you have 2 dump trucks, and you're just not prepared for that person to be leaving at that particular time.
Right.
So again, that leads back to like maybe the communication part. But other than that, a typical project should take usually about 3 to 5 days, I would say, depending on what you're dealing with.
Right, per roof.
Per roof,
as you
of
go
course,
through. So
yeah.
if I got 144 units, you're going to extrapolate that out.
Yes. So you're there for an amount of time.
Yeah.
I mean, once you're on a project, we tend not to like bounce around. So once we start a project, you just finish it and then move on to the next.
Right. Okay. And so let's get you paid. So now you're completing the work. You're going to submit invoices. I'm assuming it's going to be progress payments as you kind of go along. What I always recommend to board members is whether you're self-managed or professionally managed, and the managers know this, you want to get lien waivers, right? You want to, once the inspection's done and the board is comfortable with the fact that I'm not a contractor, but somebody who's smart enough to know has told me the work was done according to plan.
Yes.
And now I'm going to request a lien waiver. And the lien waiver that I'm going to request, I believe, is going to be both for the labor and the material.
That's correct.
So give us a little insight on what a lien waiver is.
Sure. I feel lien waivers are a good thing. It can really give a board a sense of peace of mind that the contractor basically paid his or her material and paid the labor. So if that doesn't happen, the board may have a risk of being sued because that particular product or labor was used on their association.
Okay.
So a lien waiver is really closing the books on that project. Everybody is kind of done.
It's kind of an agreement, right?
Correct.
You're agreeing to the fact that material was used, labor was completed, and I've paid for that. And now we agree that you're paid, and you're not going to come back on me and say, "Oh, hey, by the way, I was talking to the treasurer on the board, and they said that we should do this extra work." And the treasurer's like, "I don't remember that conversation." And so it eliminates, it seems, all the what ifs. Right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And so the material part always seems to be in question. In Illinois, as I understand it, a material supplier can kind of go through the contractor to the site and potentially lien that property if they're not getting the lien waiver for the materials. Am I thinking about that accurately?
Yes, they could definitely go ahead and lien each individual unit, and a unit owner would not even know it, to be quite frank, until maybe they were to sell the property, of course.
Right. It kind of shows up on
and it's a
title.
very simple process for the contractor. So if they're leery about doing that, like something's wrong.
Right.
And that would be a good conversation, maybe in the bid process to make sure that they're clear that they're going to want lien waivers at the
Right.
end.
Yeah. Set the expectations right up front.
Yes. So our accounting department will typically have lien waivers ready to go all the time. We're not asked for them quite as often, but we just have them ready. So it is a simple thing to do. It shouldn't be an issue for someone.
Yeah, and that's a good point as far as, if you're asking for a lien waiver and the contractor's pushing back, you might be dealing with the wrong contractor because any contractor there's general contractors and there's subcontractors,
Correct.
right? And the subcontractors typically are more specialized.
They're more of an independent contractor for they're having the work sub to them.
So any subcontractor that's working with a general, if it's a non-community association type property, let's say it's a commercial building somewhere, a lot of times they have to go to the title company and have those lien waivers recorded as being agreed upon. And this is a much more simplified process when you're working with a community association. So my point being, the contractor should not be pushing back when you're asking for those lien waivers. That should just be something that they're willing to give you, and it protects you as the board, and it protects you as the contractor.
Yeah, and most contractors will require a third down, and that third down really is locking in that material. Shingles specifically have become such a commodity that, you had asked me to come on a week or two ago, and the shingles have been a different price since then. So it's just something that you want to make sure you get that third and pay. But if a contractor doesn't pay by the time the job is done, there's something definitely wrong. That material should have been paid months in advance.
Yeah, and if we've learned anything over the past few years, supply chain issues can come out of nowhere.
Yes,
and greatly affect the price of materials.
Yes, and contractors know that, so they're trying to buy that material as quick as possible. It has been a burden. It's starting to get a little bit better, but again, if the contractor's using that money for something else, for instance, he's floating it for, I'm not sure, but a new bass boat or something.
Right. You never know.
You never know. So that again, it should not be an issue at all.
Okay.
It should be something that is,
So the board member is thinking, okay, I'm going to put a third down. I now have my money at risk. There's a contract in place, correct?
Yes, you could also ask for a partial waiver, and that is confirming that material has been paid right away, or a portion of it, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
Partial lien waiver and then a final lien waiver at the end. What does a typical contract look like? How many pages am I looking at? For
ours seem to be really specific. We really like to break down each key element, and then the biggest thing is we're really upfront with the unforeseen costs. Just from experience, I want to make sure the customer understands there could be bad plywood or ventilation that's not up to code. So I tend to be very clear on the pricing of that. Our proposals are about 20 pages long, believe it or not. The first 3 really talk about who we are, but the guts of that proposal is very specific on the products that we're going to be using and how they're going to be installed.
Okay. And if you're getting a 20-page proposal or contract for work that's being done, have your attorney look at it. It makes sense if you're going to spend the significant amount of money to have your roof replaced or
Yes.
your siding replaced or concrete work or asphalt, whatever it might be. Get the attorney involved to at least do a review of the contract so that if there's something in there that might be a red flag for them, it might only be a discussion point that needs clarification, but it might be something where the attorney comes back and says, you know what, I'm really not comfortable with this particular part of the contract. I'd like to make some changes. And at least you both have an opportunity to have that discussion.
Yes, in fact, that does happen quite a bit. I think that it's not a bad idea at all to have the contract reviewed by an attorney. One of the biggest things then too is the attorney can turn around and then set forth a rider of that contract. So that's when they would kind of, just like you said, they weren't really understanding or didn't really want to. They needed more clarity on certain items.
Right.
So that's where the rider really helps.
And a rider is just an attachment to the original contract that adds on to it without having to go back and rewrite the contract. You're just adding on to the contract.
Yes, you're just adding on some issues that you're working out after.
Yeah.
You're just kind of working out the details.
The specifics.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything I missed?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk today.
Yeah.
I really did. I can't thank you enough. And really all that like CAI has helped me like just build my company and really help me.
Yeah, it really
network.
is. It's a great organization, and we're proud to be a part of it as well.
Yeah.
And we like to see the vendors and the business partners that are in the industry that are in CAI definitely seem to be more top tier.
Yes.
If people want to get a hold of you at Adams Roofing, and I didn't prepare you for this, so I
It's
apologize.
okay. That's all right.
Phone number, email.
Yeah,
anything
you
like
can
that?
reach me at sep@adamsroofing.com.
Okay, and that's a easy way to get a hold of Adams and potentially start the conversation. Well, thank you, Stathie, for being here today. You've definitely been a tremendous resource, and as we always try to pick guests that add value to the conversation, and you certainly did that today. And I'm sure the board members or property managers that are watching this today are going to walk away more informed than when they started. I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. You can see or hear all of our podcasts on Spotify. You can listen on YouTube. There's different methods you can watch. You can just listen in the car. But we just want to thank you for taking some of your time to watch what we have to offer with all these experts. So thank you.